Hi, it's Neil Smith from Latin 101, and in this video I'm going to look with you at how we form the imperfect and perfect verb forms in the indicative mood. So to remind you from previous video, things you've already seen, verb forms give us 5 crucial pieces of information: person, number, tense, mood, and voice. We're going to look in this video at the third person, the imperfect and perfect tenses in the fact-telling mood called the indicative. We'll learn how to form both singular and plural and active and passive forms. Now, to think about this problem, let's remind ourselves how we create and identify forms of nouns. When we're creating noun forms, we have to find a stem and apply an ending. So if I was, for example, composing an essay about the Argonauts, the heroes who sailed with Jason on the ship Argo, and I wanted to put a sentence with them as the subject, I'd need to find the nominative plural of that noun. I'd get a dictionary entry like Argonauta, genitive Argonautai, and I'd be able to look at that and say, aha, AE ending in the genitive singular tells me it's first declension. I'll be able to get the stem by dropping that AE. I know I can add appropriate ending. For nominative plural happens to be AE, just like the genitive singular, and I come up with Argonautai. The process for creating verb forms is similar. We'll need to identify a stem, apply the appropriate ending. Your dictionary entry for a verb, on the other hand, is going to have 4 forms that we call the 4 principal parts of the verb. And when we change the form of a verb, we call it conjugation, same kind of idea as declension for substantives. When you look at those 4 principal parts, the second part is going to tell you which conjugation the verb belongs to. The second part ends with an RE, and you look at the vowel in front of that to find out which conjugation am I working with. If it's a long A, it's the first conjugation. A long E, the second conjugation. Short E is the third conjugation, and it has a little subgroup called the third IO group. If I look, when I get a third conjugation verb, if I look at the first part, if it ends in IO, it's that subcategory of the third IOs. And a long I is a fourth conjugation. To form the imperfect tense, we're going to use those first 2 parts. So let's figure out how we create the stem from the first 2 parts. Step 1, drop that RE ending from the second principal part, and then we'll modify that by adding a characteristic marker for all forms of the imperfect, this BA extension to the stem, added directly to the stem in the first and second conjugation. In the third conjugation, make the short E long E and add it. So for duco, with second principal part ducara, we'll wind up with dukeba as that stem. If it's an IO, like facio, third conjugation facere, but has an IO ending, we'll change that vowel to IE, and similarly in the fourth conjugation, that long I will change to an IE before we add the characteristic BA. So the results are going to look like this chart: serwa ba, habe ba, duke ba, but in the third IO and the fourth, facie ba, audie ba. And then we just have to apply the endings to it. The endings for imperfect tenses are the following. In the active voice, T is the third singular, NT is the third plural, and in the passive voice, the same endings with the UR applied. So when we apply those endings to the stems we just created, we come up with imperfect forms like this: serwa bat, he was guarding or protecting; serwa batur, it was being guarded or protected; habe bat, he had; habe batur, it was had. And so forth. Duke bat, she was leading; duke batur, he was being led. And the plural, identical kind of process, just applying those endings to the stems that we saw. To work with the perfect tenses, we'll use the third and fourth principal parts. We'll use the third part for the active voice and the fourth part for the passive voice. The perfect is very, very easy. Just drop the long I from the third principal part and you have the stem. All of the conjugations work exactly the same way. Here are the endings: IT for the third singular, erunt or ere, two possible endings for the third plural in the active voice. So we come up with endings like this: habuit, she had, or habuerunt, they had, for the perfect tense of habeo, verb to have. Let's take a look at some examples from Hyginus and just see how easily you can recognize this. In the table of contents, Hyginus tells us about the monstrous Scylla, who habuit, she had the upper part of a woman and the lower part of a dog. Habuit is the perfect tense of habeo. You can see that third singular ending. Scylla is the subject, so she is a singular subject. When Hyginus gets into the story of Odysseus' wanderings in section 125, Odysseus comes to Scylla. Venit is a perfect tense. He came there. You see the same ending as in habuit. But then he describes Scylla and says that she had habebat, 6 dogs sprouting from her. When we're in the story now, we're not thinking about her having that form of a dog as something that's over and past the way that we were cataloging her in the table of contents. Now this is what Odysseus is confronting, this creature that had and still had, but it was kind of ongoing in front of him, 6 dogs sprouting from her, as illustrated in this red figure crater. To form the passive voice of the perfect tense, we use the fourth principal part. And here I've expanded just a little bit the presentation of that fourth principal part. If you're looking at something like servatus you might be thinking that looks a lot like an adjective with 3 endings. And you'd be exactly right. The fourth principal part is an adjective. We're going to learn more about this adjective called a participle. It's an adjective formed from the verb. And to create the perfect passive tense, all you have to do is use that adjective together with the present tense of the verb to be. Now, like any adjective, you have to make sure that it agrees. The noun it's going to be referring to is the subject of the sentence, so it has to agree with the subject in gender and number. And just as a little reminder, the subject is always going to be the nominative case. So we'll be looking to match the subject in gender and number. Let's take an example from section 120 of Hyginus. Orestes and Pylades are in this illustration from a painting by Benjamin West being brought actually not to the king, but to the king's priest. But Hyginus tells us that they were brought, sunt ducti, Orestes et Pylades. They're your 2 nominative subjects. It's plural. They were brought to the king. Sunt is the present tense of to be. Ducti is just that fourth principal part from ductus, but nominative and plural to agree with the masculine plural, Orestes et Pylades. So that's all there is to the formation of the imperfect and perfect tenses of the indicative voice. Just to summarize, verbs will have 4 principal parts that you'll see when you learn new vocabulary. You'll look at the first 2 parts to form the imperfect. You'll look at the third part for the perfect active, the fourth part for the perfect passive. And your reward for this is that more than 3/4 of the sentences in Hyginus use either the imperfect or the perfect indicative tense. So you'll have a lot of reading available to you when you get comfortable with these 2 tenses. Enjoy it, and bye.